She was 9 months pregnant with twins, and she was mopping vomit off a diner floor at midnight. The mop handle snapped in her hands. Elena dropped to her knees on the wet tile, one arm cradling the massive curve of her belly, the other bracing against the floor. A contraction ripped through her back like lightning. Not now. Please, not now. And that's when the bell above the door chimed, and the most dangerous man in Chicago walked in and saw the woman he had never stopped loving on her knees, pregnant with his children, in a diner that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. What happened in the next 72 hours would change both of their lives forever. But not in the way you think. Because the real shock wasn't the reunion. It wasn't the betrayal he was about to uncover. It was what the doctors told him about his twin daughters after they were born. Words that brought the most feared Mafia boss on the Eastern Seaboard to his knees. Stay with me until the very end. Before we continue, do me one quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. Seriously. If you're new here, join the family. We tell stories that will have you canceling plans just to finish watching. Comment what country you're watching from. Now let's get into it. Chicago, November 2024. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, it eats you alive. Wind off Lake Michigan turns every street into a wind tunnel, and by 10 o'clock, the only people still outside are the desperate and the dangerous. Rosie's Diner sat on the corner of Halsted and 47th, deep on the south side. The neon sign out front buzzed and flickered, and the R had burned out months ago, so it just read Ozie's. Nobody had fixed it. Nobody was going to. The vinyl booths were cracked. The linoleum floor was peeling at every seam, and the coffee tasted like regret. But Rosie's was open 24 hours, and for the people in this neighborhood, that was a lifeline. Elena Marquez stood behind the counter, 9 months pregnant with twins, wearing a faded yellow uniform that Rosie had dug out of a storage closet because nothing in any store would stretch over her belly anymore. Her ankles were so swollen she couldn't see them past the curve of her stomach. Her lower back screamed with every step. And the girls, because they were girls, the ultrasound had confirmed that 3 months ago, the girls had been kicking her ribs non-stop since 4 in the afternoon. Order up, table 9. Benny, on the cook, slid a plate of eggs and bacon through the kitchen window. He was a thin man with arms like rope and a cigarette he never lit tucked behind his ear. Elena grabbed the plate. A contraction. Braxton Hicks, she told herself. Just Braxton Hicks. Tightened across her belly like a belt being cinched. She steadied herself on the counter, breathed through it, and picked up the plate. Girl, sit down. That was Rosie, 5'3", 220 pounds, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and a voice that could comfort you like a gospel hymn or cut you like a box cutter. Rosie Davis had owned this diner for 31 years. She had seen everything. She had tolerated very little. I'm fine, Rosie. You're 9 months pregnant with 2 babies and you've been on your feet for 10 hours. That's not fine. Oh, that's insanity. Rent is due Friday. I need $40 more. $40 ain't worth going into labor on my floor. I just mopped. Elena almost smiled. Almost. She carried the plate to table 9 and set it down in front of Gerald, an 80-year-old widower who came in every night at 10 and read the Tribune until midnight. He slipped a $5 bill under his coffee cup like he always did. Elena suspected that $5 was half his dinner budget. The thought made her chest ache every single time. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, sweetheart. You take care of those babies. Elena turned back toward the counter. And that's when the front door opened. Now let me tell you something. There are moments in life where the air in a room changes. Not slowly, not gradually. It shifts, like a channel switching. 1 second, everything is normal. The next, every nerve in your body fires at once. This was one of those moments. 3 men walked in. The first two were enormous. Black overcoats, earpieces, hands clasped in front of them. One had a scar running from his left temple to his jaw. The other had a neck wider than his head. They scanned the diner in less than 2 seconds. Exits, sight lines, threats. This was a muscle. This was security. But the third man, he walked between them the way a blade walks between the walls of a sheath. 6'2", charcoal suit under a black cashmere overcoat that cost more than every appliance in this diner combined. Dark hair combed back from a face that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Sharp jaw, eyes the color of espresso left to go cold. Dominic Valenti. If you lived in Chicago and you heard that name, one of two things happened. You paid your respects, or you disappeared. Dominic Valenti had inherited the Valenti Empire at 26 when his father was killed. By 30, he controlled territory in 3 states. By 35, even the FBI referred to him by his first name because they'd given up trying to build a case that could stick. He was 41 now. He had more money than some countries. He had more enemies than most armies. And he had one weakness that he had spent 2 years trying to bury. Her name was Elena. She was standing 12 feet away from him, pregnant, exhausted, holding a coffee pot in one hand and a dish rag in the other, wearing a uniform that was falling apart at the seams. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers and shattered on the linoleum. And a hot coffee spread across the floor like a dark stain. Every head in the diner turned. Elena didn't move. Couldn't. Her body locked down. Every muscle, every joint, every nerve ending fused into a single frozen response. Because the man standing in the doorway of Rosie's diner was the man she had walked away from 2 years ago. The man she had loved more than oxygen. The man whose children were currently kicking the walls of her womb. And he was staring at her belly like the ground had just opened beneath his feet. Elena. His voice, that low, quiet, devastating voice that could silence a room full of killers without raising a single decibel. Dominic. Hers was barely a whisper. Nobody breathed. Not the bodyguards. Not Gerald. Not Benny in the kitchen, who was watching through the window with a spatula frozen in midair. And Dominic's eyes moved from her face to her belly, then back to her face. The math happened in real time. She could see it. 9 months pregnant. They had been divorced for 2 years, but there had been one night, one stupid, desperate, beautiful night in February. A night neither of them had ever spoken about. A night that apparently had created 2 lives. How far along? His voice was so controlled it vibrated. 9 months. Twins? Her hand moved to her belly. Protective. Instinctive. Girls. Something cracked in his expression. Not visibly. Not in a way that anyone else would have noticed. But Elena had spent 3 years married to this man. She had learned to read the hairline fractures in his granite composure, the way a geologist reads fault lines. He hadn't known. He genuinely hadn't known. Wait in the car, Dominic said to his men without looking at them. Boss, we shouldn't. Wait. In the car. They left. The bell chimed twice. And now it was just Dominic Valenti and the pregnant ex-wife he hadn't seen in 2 years, standing in a diner on the south side of Chicago with broken glass and spilled coffee between them, like a river neither of them knew how to cross. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dominic said. And that question, that single question, detonated something in Elena that had been building for months. "Tell you?" She laughed. But it wasn't a laugh. It was the sound of a dam cracking. "I called you, Dominic. I called the house the day I found out. March 15th. Your brother answered." Something shifted behind Dominic's eyes, something dark and predatory. "Nico told me you had moved on," Elena continued, and her voice was shaking now, but not from weakness, from rage. "He said you were with someone new. He said if I tried to contact you again, there would be consequences." Consequences, Dominic. From the brother of the most powerful man on the East Coast. What was I supposed to do? Show up at the compound? Send a carrier pigeon to a man who apparently forgot I existed? The silence that followed was the most dangerous kind. The kind where violence lives right beneath the surface, pacing like a caged animal. "Nico said this to you," Dominic repeated. "Yes. There was never anyone else, Elena. There has never been anyone else." The words hit her like a truck. She gripped the counter for balance. "Then why?" "Because my brother has been trying to take my empire from me for the last 2 years. And the only thing standing between him and the throne was you." Let me pause here and explain something, because this is where the story cracks wide open. In the Valenti world, power wasn't just about territory and money. It was about bloodline, legacy. The unwritten law was iron. The boss's firstborn inherits. When Dominic married Elena, she became the future mother of the Valenti heir. That made her the most important woman in the empire. When Elena left, Nico saw his opening. No wife, no heir. Dominic's long-term grip on power weakened. Nico positioned himself as successor. He built alliances with underbosses. He whispered in ears. He made promises. And then Elena called. Pregnant with twins. 2 Valenti heirs. Not 1. 2. Nico's entire house of cards would collapse if Dominic found out. So Nico lied. He told Elena that Dominic had moved on. He told Dominic that Elena wanted nothing to do with the family. He played both sides against each other, betting that pride and pain would do the rest. And for 9 months it worked, until a closed highway and a detour through the south side put Dominic Valenti face to face with everything his brother had stolen from him. But here's what none of them knew yet. Nico hadn't just lied. He had done something far, far worse, and it was about to come out. Rosie appeared from the kitchen with a mop and the energy of a woman who had absolutely zero patience for male drama. "Whatever this is," Rosie said, pointing the mop handle at Dominic like a weapon, "you take it to booth 7, back corner, away from my regulars." Dominic looked at Rosie. Then, for the first time since entering the diner, the mask slipped. A faint smile crossed his face. He respected her immediately. You could see it. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Rosie blinked. She hadn't expected compliance. "Well, good, go." They sat in booth 7, crack formica table between them, a salt shaker with rice in it, a ketchup bottle with dried residue on the cap, and between them, 2 years of silence that neither of them could swallow. "Tell me everything," Dominic said. "From the beginning." So she did. She told him about calling Nico, about the ice in his voice when she mentioned the pregnancy, about the threat that followed. She told him about moving to the south side under her maiden name, about the apartment on the 3rd floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in 6 years and the heat had been broken for a month, and about sleeping in 2 coats because her landlord refused to send a repair crew to a building he was hoping the city would condemn. She told him about the job she couldn't get Every application, every interview, the moment a background check connected her to the Valenti name, the door slammed shut. She was radioactive, unhireable, blacklisted by a last name she hadn't even kept. Rosie was the only one who would hire me, Elena said. No questions, no background check. You show up, you work, you get paid. I don't care if you married the president or the devil. That's what she said. And the babies? The prenatal care? Elena's jaw tightened. The free clinic on 63rd, 4-hour wait, 7 minutes with a doctor. They told me twin pregnancies are high risk. They told me I needed a specialist. I told them I had $19 in my checking account. Dominic's hands flattened on the table. His knuckles went white. Elena, the twins, are they healthy? She hesitated, and that hesitation, that single beat of silence, was louder than anything she had said all night. The last ultrasound showed something, she whispered, a possible compression issue with the umbilical cord on baby B. The doctor at the clinic said it could be nothing, or it could mean. Her voice broke. She pressed her fist against her mouth. They said I need a specialist in monitoring equipment that the clinic doesn't have. I've been praying every night that it's nothing. Every single night. Dominic pulled out his phone. He dialed. It rang once. Dr. Reeves, this is Dominic Valenti. I need you at Northwestern Memorial in 1 hour. Full perinatology team. Twin pregnancy. Possible cord compression on baby B. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to wake up. 1 hour. He hung up. He looked at Elena. You're not going back to that apartment tonight. Dominic, this isn't about us. This isn't about the divorce or the pride or any of it. This is about our daughters. One of them might be in danger right now, and you're going to let me help. Or so help me God, Elena. I will carry you out of this diner myself. Elena stared at him. Tears tracked down her cheeks. She wiped them with the back of her hand, angry at herself, angry at him, angry at the universe for making this so complicated. Just for tonight, she whispered. Just for tonight. Dominic stood. He took off his cashmere coat and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her completely, warm, heavy, smelling of sandalwood and cedar, and everything she had spent 2 years trying to forget. He walked to the register. Rosie was standing there with her arms folded and one eyebrow at the ceiling. How much has she earned tonight? Dominic asked. $83, tips included. He placed a stack of bills on the counter. $10,000. Rosie counted it without blinking. That's a whole lot of money for meatloaf tips. It's for her last shift. Rosie stepped out from behind the counter, all 5'3" of her lined up against Dominic Valenti like a pit bull squaring up to a grizzly bear. Listen here, Mr. Italian Suit. That girl has worked for me 5 months. Never late. Never complained. Worked harder carrying 2 babies than most people work with nothing but a hangover. Ma, you don't get to waltz in here and make her decisions. That's her call. Dominic looked at Rosie with something approaching reverence. You're absolutely right. They both turned to Elena. She stood by booth 7, drowning in his coat, one hand on her belly. She looked at Rosie, then at Dominic. I'll visit every Sunday, Elena told Rosie. Rosie crossed the diner and pulled Elena into a hug so fierce that Benny in the kitchen had to look away and pretend he was chopping onions. But here's what was happening while Dominic was in that diner. Something that nobody knew about yet. 30 minutes before Dominic walked into Rosie's, his brother Nico received a phone call from a contact inside Dominic's security team. The contact told Nico that Dominic's car had been rerouted through the south side. that the boss had stopped at a diner, and that the boss had not come out. Nico Valenti hung up the phone, and his blood turned to ice, because Nico knew exactly what was on the south side. He knew exactly who was working at that diner. He had been tracking Elena for months, not to protect her, to make sure she stayed invisible. And if Dominic found out about the twins, Nico's entire power play would collapse overnight. 2 heirs, 2 Valenti bloodline daughters. Nico would go from presumed successor to nothing. Nico made a second phone call. This one was to a man named Sergei. Sergei didn't have a last name that anyone used. He had a skill set, specifically the skill of making problems disappear. "The woman," Nico said. "She can't talk to him, whatever it takes, tonight." Sergei asked one question. "And the babies?" Nico was quiet for 4 seconds. 4 seconds that defined exactly what kind of man he was. "Collateral," Nico said. "Now do you understand why I told you to stay until the end? Because this isn't just a love story, it's a survival story, and the clock just started ticking." Northwestern Memorial Hospital, 1:47 a.m. The perinatology suite on the 8th floor had been opened exclusively for Elena Marquez. Dr. Catherine Reeves, one of the top maternal fetal specialists in the Midwest, had arrived 18 minutes after Dominic's call, wearing scrubs over what appeared to be pajama pants and an expression that said she was used to being woken up by powerful men with urgent problems. Elena lay on the examination table, the ultrasound wand moving slowly across her belly. 2 screens showed 2 heartbeats. Baby A, strong, steady, rhythmic. Baby B, slightly slower, was slightly irregular. Dr. Reeves frowned. She adjusted the wand. She pressed deeper. "What is it?" Elena asked, gripping the sides of the table. "Baby B's cord is showing compression against the uterine wall. It's been restricting blood flow. Based on this, it's been happening for several weeks." "What does that mean?" Dominic asked from the corner of the room where he stood with his arms crossed. "It means baby B hasn't been receiving optimal blood supply, specifically to the lower extremities." Elena's face went white. "Her legs. I need to run more tests, but the reduced blood flow combined with the cord position, there's a possibility of neurological impact to the lumbar spine region. We won't know the full extent until after delivery." "A possibility," Elena repeated. "So it might be nothing?" "Doctor." A. Reeves looked at her with the honesty of a doctor who had learned that false hope was crueler than hard truth. "It might be nothing, but I want to prepare you for the possibility that baby B may have limited or no mobility in her lower limbs." The room went silent. Not diner silent, hospital silent, the kind of silence that hums with machines and fear. Elena didn't cry. Something shifted in her face. Dominic saw it. The exact same expression she used to wear when she walked into rooms full of dangerous men and translated deals without flinching. The fear didn't vanish. She folded it up, put it away, and locked the drawer. She sat up on the table. She looked Dr. Reeves dead in the eyes. "How long has the compression been happening?" Dr. Reeves blinked. Most patients fell apart at this point. "Based on the imaging, potentially several weeks, possibly longer. And every hour we wait, it gets worse." "Potentially, yes. I was going to recommend deliver them now." Elena's voice was steady. "Absolute. Not in 2 hours, not after more tests. Right now. I have been feeling something wrong with baby B for weeks. I told the clinic doctor. He said it was probably positioning. I knew it wasn't. I have been carrying this feeling in my chest for a month, knowing something was wrong, And I couldn't do anything about it because I didn't have the money or the insurance or anyone who would listen to me. Her voice cracked on the last four words, but she held. I'm done waiting. I'm done being helpless. You have the best surgical team in Chicago standing in this building right now. Well, so deliver my daughters and save my baby's legs if you still can. The room was dead silent. Dr. Reeves looked at Elena for a long moment. Then she nodded, not with pity, with respect. Prepper 3, we're going now. Dominic hadn't moved. He stood in the corner, watching the woman who had mopped floors and served meatloaf for 5 months because his brother had buried her. And even now, even at the worst moment of her life, she wasn't waiting for someone to save her. She was giving the orders. And in that moment, Dominic understood something he should have understood years ago. He hadn't married a woman who needed his protection. He had married a woman who was his equal, and he had been too blind to see it. Elena looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. I'm scared, Dominic. He crossed the room and took her hand. I know. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. But inside, behind the calm exterior, a furnace was roaring. His daughter, his baby girl, might never walk because her mother couldn't afford a specialist, because his brother had made sure she couldn't. Nico had taken many things from Dominic over the past 2 years, but this, the health of his child, this was the one thing that could never be given back. At 4:12 a.m., Dr. Reeves performed the cesarean delivery in Operating Suite 3. Dominic stood at Elena's head, holding her hand, wearing scrubs and a surgical mask, and looking like the world's most unlikely birthing partner. Baby A arrived first. She came out screaming, furious, lungs like a fire alarm, 6 pounds, 2 ounces, dark hair, her mother's mouth. She's perfect, the nurse said, placing her on Elena's chest. Elena sobbed. Dominic leaned down and pressed his forehead to Elena's temple. Then baby B, she was smaller, 5 pounds, 4 ounces. She came out quiet, not silent. She made a soft, mewling sound like a kitten. But she didn't scream. Her eyes were closed. Her fingers were curled into tiny fists. And her legs were still. Dr. Reeves examined her immediately. She tested reflexes. She ran her thumb along the sole of baby B's foot. Nothing. She checked again. Pressed. Tapped. Nothing. The doctor looked at Dominic. The look said everything. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard a vein bulged in his temple. He looked down at his daughter, this tiny, silent 5-pound girl. And the most feared man in Chicago had to turn away so that the surgical team wouldn't see his face. Give her to me, Elena whispered, and give me my baby. The nurse placed baby B in Elena's other arm. Both daughters now, one screaming, one silent, both alive, both hers. Isabella, Elena whispered to baby A. Then she looked at baby B. She kissed her forehead. And you're Lucia, my little light. Dominic stood at the window of the recovery suite watching the sun come up over Lake Michigan. His phone was in his hand. He had made 3 calls in the last hour. The first was to Marco. Find Sergey. Nico hired him tonight. I want to know for what. The second was to Dr. Reeves. Every specialist on the planet. I don't care where they are. I don't care what it costs. My daughter will have every option that exists. The third was to his brother. Nico answered on the 4th ring. His voice was careful, controlled. Dom, what's going on? It's 5 a.m. Come to the penthouse, noon. We need to talk about the future of the family. Everything okay? Noon, Nico. He hung up. But what Nico didn't know was that by 11:30 that morning, Marco had already found Sergei. And Sergei, when confronted by three of Dominic's men in a warehouse on the west side, talked within 7 minutes. He told them everything. The phone call from Nico, the order to silence Elena. The word collateral used to describe two unborn children. Marco recorded the confession on his phone. He sent it to Dominic. Dominic listened to it twice. The second time his hands shook, not from fear, from a rage so total, so absolute, that it had to be held with both hands or it would have consumed everything in its path. His own brother had ordered the elimination of his pregnant ex-wife and his unborn daughters. His own blood. Noon. The penthouse. Nico arrived in a navy suit with an easy smile and the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He stepped out of the elevator into the living room and immediately sensed something wrong. Marco and Victor were there. They weren't sitting. They were standing, arms at their sides, faces like granite. Dominic sat in a leather chair by the window. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a black sweater and dark pants. Casual, quiet, the most dangerous version of himself. "Sit down, Nico." Nico sat. His smile hadn't faded yet, but it was faltering at the edges. "How's business?" Dominic asked. "Good. The port shipments came in clean. I wasn't asking about business." Dominic leaned forward. "I was asking about you. How are you, Nico? Sleep well last night?" "Like a baby. Why?" Interesting choice of words. Dominic pulled out his phone. He pressed play. Sergei's voice filled the room. Tinny through the phone speaker, but perfectly clear. "Nico Valenti called me at 11:15 p.m. He said the woman can't talk to him. Whatever it takes. I asked about the babies. He said collateral." The color drained from Nico's face. Not slowly, instantly, like someone had pulled a plug. "Dom, don't. You don't understand. She was going to ruin everything we built." "We?" Dominic stood up. "We built nothing, Nico. I built this. Every brick, every dollar, every drop of blood. You rode in my shadow and called it a career. She made you weak. She always did. And a woman like that doesn't belong in. She gave me 2 daughters last night." Dominic's voice dropped to a whisper. "Twin girls, Isabella and Lucia, 5 hours old, and one of them will never walk because her mother couldn't afford a specialist, because you made sure she couldn't." Nico opened his mouth, closed it. Then something ugly twisted across his face. The mask of the charming younger brother finally fell away, and what was underneath was reptilian. "One of them can't walk?" Nico said slowly. A smile crept across his face. Not a nervous smile, a calculating one. "Well, maybe that's for the best. A crippled heir is barely an heir at all. The commission will never respect a bloodline that rolls in on wheels. You traded an empire for a girl in a wheelchair, Dom. How's that for legacy?" Dominic moved so fast that Marco barely had time to step between them. Dominic's hand was around Nico's throat, lifting him half out of the chair, before Victor grabbed Dominic's arm. "Boss," Marco said firmly. "Not like this. Not here." Dominic held his brother in the air for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds where Nico's feet dangled and his face turned purple, and every man in that room understood exactly how close they were to watching a man die. Then Dominic let go. Nico crashed back into the chair, gasping, clawing at his collar. Dominic straightened his sweater. His hand was trembling, but his voice was ice. "You told Elena I had moved on. You told me she disappeared. You separated me from the mother of my children for 9 months. You let her freeze in a broken apartment. When you let her work on her feet at 9 months pregnant, you let my daughter's condition go unmonitored. Dominic stepped closer, close enough that Nico could see the blood vessels in his brother's eyes. And then you called Sergei. You used the word collateral to describe my children, my newborn daughters, and now you sit in my house and call my daughter a cripple. Dom, I'm your brother. My brother died the second he threatened my children. Dominic straightened up. His voice returned to that terrifying calm. You have 24 hours to leave Chicago, leave the state, leave the country if you're smart. Every asset, every account, every connection you have within the Valenti organization is frozen as of this morning. You can't do this. The underbosses will. The underbosses work for me. They always have. You were playing pretend. Hey, Nico, and the game is over. Nico looked at Marco, at Victor. Their eyes were stone. If I see you again, Dominic said, if you come within 500 miles of Elena or my daughters, I won't exile you. I'll bury you, and I'll do it myself. Nico stood. His face was twisted. Rage, humiliation, and the desperate realization that everything he had schemed and lied and betrayed for had amounted to nothing. She ruined you, Nico spat from the elevator. No, Dominic said. She saved me. You just couldn't see it because you've never loved anything but power. Get out. The elevator doors closed. Nico was gone. Within a week, he was in South America. Within a month, the name Nico Valenti had been scrubbed from every record, every ledger, every conversation in the empire. He became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in back rooms, where the empire continued. It always did. But it continued differently now. The first night home from the hospital was the hardest night of Dominic Valenti's life, and that includes the night his father was killed. The penthouse was silent at 3 a.m. Elena was asleep in the master bedroom, still recovering from the C-section, her body stitched and swollen and exhausted beyond language. A night nurse sat in the nursery monitoring both cribs, but Dominic couldn't sleep. He stood in the nursery doorway in the dark, watching the rise and fall of two tiny chests. Isabella had kicked her blanket off for the third time. She slept like she lived, violently, defiantly, all elbows in fury. Lucia was still, perfectly still. Her little hands rested on her chest. Her breathing was soft and even. She looked peaceful. She looked perfect. Dominic walked to her crib. He reached in and lifted her out, careful to support her neck the way the nurse had shown him. She weighed nothing, less than the pistol he kept in his desk drawer. He held her against his chest and felt her heart beat against his, small and rapid like a bird's. He looked at her legs, tiny, motionless. He touched her foot. She didn't react. Dominic Valenti stood in the dark nursery holding his daughter and made her a promise that no one else heard. I don't care what they say you can't do, he whispered. I don't care what the doctors predict or the specialists estimate. You are my daughter. You are a Valenti, and I will spend every dollar, move every mountain, and burn every obstacle in your path until the world gives you everything it owes you. Do you hear me, Lucia? Everything. Lucia yawned. Her tiny fist curled tighter around his finger. It was the most important deal Dominic Valenti ever made, and it was the only one he intended to keep for the rest of his life. 3 months later, the nursery in the penthouse had 2 cribs, one white, one ivory, both custom built by a carpenter in Vermont that Elena had chosen from a catalog. Above each crib, a name in hand-painted letters. Isabella. Lucia. Isabella was the loud one. She screamed when she was hungry, screamed when she was tired, scream when the sunlight hit her face wrong. She had Dominic's frown and Elena's lungs, and the temperament of a tiny dictator. Lucia was quiet. She watched the world with wide, dark eyes that missed nothing. She smiled before Isabella did. She grabbed fingers with a grip that surprised everyone. She was curious, alert, brilliant, and she couldn't move her legs. The diagnosis had been confirmed by 3 separate specialists. Spinal cord ischemia caused by prolonged umbilical cord compression during the 3rd trimester. Lucia had full sensation in her upper body and partial sensation in her hips. Below the knees, nothing. When the 3rd specialist confirmed what the first 2 had said, Elena sat in the nursery for an hour, holding Lucia, not crying, just holding her, breathing, processing. Dominic found her there. "I keep thinking," Elena said softly, "that if I had been able to see a real doctor, if I had the monitoring, if someone had caught it early." "Don't." Dominic knelt beside the rocking chair. "Don't do that yourself." "How can I not? I'm her mother. I was supposed to protect her." "You did protect her. You carried her for 9 months with no help. No money, no support. You kept her alive, Elena. You kept both of them alive. Working on your feet, serving meatloaf, sleeping in 2 coats. You did what no one else could have done. But it wasn't enough. It was everything." Lucia made a small sound. A coo. She reached up with one tiny hand and grabbed a fistful of Dominic's sweater. He looked down at his daughter. This 5-pound girl who would never run through a park or climb stairs without help or dance at her own wedding the way other girls dreamed about. And Dominic Valenti, the man who had built an empire on the principle that sentiment was weakness, made a decision that stunned everyone in his organization. He stepped back. Not completely, not forever, but he restructured the entire operation. He elevated his most trusted captains. He delegated territory management. He reduced his direct involvement to oversight only. For the first time in 15 years, Dominic Valenti chose his family over his empire. He was at every therapy appointment. He researched pediatric spinal specialists across 4 continents. He had the penthouse redesigned so that every doorway, every counter, every surface would be accessible. He learned about adaptive equipment, specialized wheelchairs, physical therapy protocols that most fathers had never heard of. And every Sunday morning, a black SUV pulled up to Rosie's Diner on Halsted and 47th. Dominic carried Isabella in one arm. Elena pushed Lucia's stroller with the other. They sat in booth 7. Elena ordered coffee. Dominic ordered the meatloaf. Rosie brought extra napkins and cooed over the girls like a grandmother who had been waiting her whole life for grandchildren to spoil. "That meatloaf still tastes terrible," Dominic told Rosie one Sunday. "Then stop ordering it." "Can't. It's the best meal I've ever had." Rosie looked at him, then at Elena, then at the 2 babies. Isabella was screaming about something. Lucia was watching a fly on the window with absolute fascination. "You turned out all right," Rosie said to Dominic, "for a man in an Italian suit." 1 year later, Lucia took her first independent wheel push in a custom pediatric wheelchair. It was 3 feet, from the edge of the living room rug to the leg of the coffee table. Elena, Dominic, Rosie, who had been invited for dinner, and Isabella, who was trying to eat a wooden block, all watched. Lucia reached the coffee table. She slapped it with both hands and made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a war cry. Isabella, who had been trying to eat a wooden block, looked up at her sister, dropped the block, and clapped. She didn't know why everyone was crying. She just knew something good had happened. Dominic dropped to his knees. He pressed his forehead to the floor. Not in grief, not in defeat, in gratitude, because his daughter wasn't broken. She wasn't less. She was a Valenti. And Valentis don't stop. They adapt. They overcome. They find a way. Elena knelt beside him. She put her hand on his back. Hey, she whispered. She gets that from you. He looked up at her. His eyes were red. His smile was real. The first real smile in years. No, he said. She gets that from you. Rosie, sitting on the couch with a plate of her own meatloaf that she had brought from the diner, watched the whole scene. She set the plate down. She took off her reading glasses. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, hard, like she was annoyed at herself for being emotional. Then she looked at Lucia, this tiny girl in a tiny wheelchair who had just conquered 3 feet of living room floor like it was Everest. You know what? Rosie said, her voice thick and rough and full of everything. That little girl right there is going to run this whole city one day, and she won't even need to stand up to do it. Nobody argued, because everyone in that room knew Rosie Davis had never been wrong about a single thing in 31 years. And that is the story of how a wrong turn on the south side of Chicago brought a family back from the edge. Not a perfect family, not an easy one, a family built on second chances and hard truths, and a little girl in a wheelchair who taught the most powerful man in Chicago that real strength has nothing to do with how far you can walk. It's about how far you're willing to go for the people you love. Now I need to ask you something, and I want your honest answer in the comments. If you were Elena, would you have given Dominic that second chance, or would you have kept walking? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And listen, if this story hit you somewhere deep, if it made you feel something real, then do me this one favor. Hit that like button, smash it, because every like tells the algorithm to push this story to someone else who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We tell stories like this every single week. Stories that make you laugh, make you cry, make you cancel your plans just to finish watching. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, join the family. I promise you, the next story is going to be even bigger. Thank you for staying until the end. That means the world to me. I'll see you in the next one.